What's up guys, I'm Joel Dodge, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to help you find the best iPad for your situation in 2020. Let's get into it. So guys, there's a few things I want to say before we dive into this video, and the first is that I'm not going to crown one of these iPads the winner overall. My goal is to present the pros and cons of each iPad so that you can make a well-informed decision on which one you get. The second thing I want to say is I currently have the iPad Pro from 2018, so I don't actually own any of the new iPads that I'm going to be talking about in this video, but I've done a lot of research and I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't feel confident in the information that I'm giving you guys. The last thing I wanted to say before we get into it is that I'm only going to be covering specs and information that is going to affect your ability to make music on the iPad. So if you're interested in the screen resolutions and their ability to make videos and things like that, this isn't the video for you. So all that being said, let's get into it. So the first iPad we're going to talk about is the new iPad Pro, and there's a 10.9 inch and a 13 inch. The question of which one of those you should get is actually the most frequently asked question that I've had on this entire YouTube channel. So I wanted to answer this in a video. From a specs perspective, there's no difference between the two, at least in this generation, the 2020 model. So that being said, it really comes down to a personal preference. Do you like the bigger screen, or do you like it to be a little smaller and feel a little more portable? I think the best thing you could do to figure out which one you like is just go down to the Apple Store or a Best Buy or something and just get one in your hands, just see how it feels. If for some reason you can't do that, I'll just say that my preference is the 10.9 inch. So from a specs perspective, it has the A12Z processor in it, and it has 6 gigs of RAM. So something I want to say real quick is just from the perspective of using computers. When you hear, if you were to hear that a computer had 6 gigabytes of RAM, you would definitely think that it's not going to be a very capable computer. But with these iPads, the apps and the software on them is optimized to be run on these devices, and you're going to find that 6 gigabytes of RAM equates to so much more than you would think. And so from a power perspective and from my personal use, my iPad actually only has 4 gigs of RAM because it's the 2018 model. I've found that even with just 4 gigs of RAM, that it way exceeds what I need when it comes to audio production. So in my opinion, the new iPad Pros are way more powerful than you'd actually need them to be for doing audio production. But of course, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get more power if you can, right? So the more power you have, the more MIDI instruments you can run, the more plugins you can use all at the same time. So I'm not telling you to not get this and that it's like a waste of money to get that extra power. But what I am saying is that it's a lot more power than most people are going to need when making music on the iPad. The other thing about the new iPad Pro is that it uses a USB-C port. I actually think when it comes to audio production that this is the thing that has the biggest impact. Because it's a USB-C port instead of a Lightning port, you can plug more things into it at once. You can power devices that Lightning port can't power. So things like Focusrite interfaces, even PreSonus interfaces. A lot of these bigger, more powerful interfaces, you're not going to be able to plug them directly into the other iPads that I'm going to be talking about on this list. You can still use it with them, but you're going to have some kind of external power supply for those. And when it comes to making music on your iPad, I think most of us want to keep it simple and portable, and that really does kind of limit your ability to be portable and be mobile while you're making music on the iPad. The last thing that I'm going to say about the iPad Pro is that there doesn't seem to be much difference between the 2020 version and the 2018. The real improvements that they've made to the 2020 version of the iPad are almost all have to do with the camera system. They've added more lenses and there's some cool new features, but as far as music production, it's really not any better. If you want the iPad Pro, you really might be better off finding a refurbished one and just saving some money when you get it. So the next iPad that I want to tell you guys about is the iPad Mini. And the iPad mini has the A12 processor in it, which this is the same processor that you'd find in the 2018 iPad Pros. And it has 3 gigabytes of RAM. And then the final thing is it is Lightning port. So those are all the specs or details you should know about this iPad. My thoughts on this device is, first off, it's going to be plenty powerful for anything that you want to do with music production. Like I was saying before, they optimize these apps to run smoothly despite of not having a ton of RAM in these devices. And something that's unique about this one is that it's even more portable than any of the other iPads that they offer right now because it's smaller. I think for a lot of people that's going to make this the ideal iPad. So I think for a lot of guitar players, this is going to be the ideal iPad to get because it's plenty powerful enough to run your amp and effect simulations and stuff like that. And it's going to be that much easier to bring with you if you're playing in a live performance or in a live situation. Most interfaces you're going to use for electric guitar are powered by Lightning port. So you don't necessarily need the USB-C to be able to power, you know, things like the iRigs or the Apogee GM Plus. Those will all be powered by Lightning port. For those of you who aren't guitar players, there are interfaces that are powered by Lightning port. So the last iPad I want to talk about on this list is just the standard iPad, and it's 10.2 inches. It's going to have the A10 processor in it. It's 3 gigs of RAM. The last thing to know from like a specs perspective is that it uses the Lightning port. The reason I wanted to cover this iPad is I think it's going to be the most bang for your buck. I think personally, I think that this iPad is going to be more than powerful enough to run any software that you're going to want to run for music production, and it's cheaper. It's significantly cheaper than the other 2 iPads that I've brought up on this list. And it's going to get you into this whole world of making music on the iPad. If you're trying to save some money, but still want to have a full device that you can make music on, I think this really is going to be the most bang for your buck. So guys, if you're familiar with the iPads that Apple offers right now, you'll know that there's one that I haven't covered yet, and that's the iPad Air. The reason I've waited to this point to cover that one is I think that it is the iPad that's going to meet the least amount of people's needs. From a specs perspective, it's basically the same as the iPad mini, but you're gonna have to pay more for it because it has a little bit bigger of a screen. I think the only people that that's gonna be right for is people that want the specs that the mini has with an iPad that has a little bit bigger of a screen. The reason I don't think that's necessarily the best option though is because when you start looking at that price point, you'd probably be better off just getting one of the iPad Pros. And if you want the bigger screen but don't want to spend that extra money, then you should just get the standard iPad. So I guess that's my logic, is that it's kind of like in this limbo area that it's like it's kind of overshadowed by the other iPads being able to meet those needs better. So guys, the last thing I want to say is that from a storage perspective, I would recommend at the bare minimum getting 64 gigabytes of storage and preferably getting 128 or more. The reason I say that is if you get any less than that, you're going to find yourself continually coming back to delete things off of the iPad to make room for your new projects and stuff, and that will just get pretty annoying very quickly. So guys, definitely let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. And if you have an iPad that you're making music on, I would love to hear what your setup is down there also. But as always, die empty. I'll catch you in the next one. In my opinion, please don't spend $300 to be able to type on your iPad, man. Like, you can get a $50 Bluetooth keyboard that basically accomplishes the same thing. So anyway, that's my thoughts. $300 is a lot to be able to type on your iPad.